Hello, everyone. Great evening and a beautiful Monday. Welcome to another episode of Heartship, Now Leadership, Diversity and Is. We explore the science of diversity and culture through a global and holistic lens on our show. I'm your host, Mila Duchamp, a DEI scientist, and today I will be exploring the importance of a psychological safe workplace. To join me in this discussion, I have a brilliant guest, Alen Chao. Alen Chao has been a workforce consultant after getting his master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. This field allows him to look into the attitudes and behaviors across various organizations and shaped his professional views on why work can be awful sometimes and the scientific and humane ways to make it better. Let's bring Alen on. Welcome, Alen.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mila. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Alen. And it's always an honor speaking with you and exploring your mind and the beauty that goes inside your thought process, right? I'm really excited. I'm really, really excited the topic that we picked today to discuss on this. We are living in an era where we have the most diverse generation at the workplace. And at the same time, we have the most discombobulating work etiquette at the workplace, where the Z generation, the millennials, the zennials, their ones are drastically different from the X generation and baby boomers. This is also tied with the individual's culture, let it be personal or at home, right? The cultures are very much different, and the ideologies that they adopt based on which part of the country that they are based out of or the world that they are from. As work ethics intersect and repulse and fail as to collaborate, toxic work environments are born which impact psychological safety, which is a great segue to our topic. I want to explore it, but to start with, I want to understand from your perspective, right, and from your years of expertise, what does psychological safety mean?
That's a great question. A psychologically safe workplace, when we're talking about it within the context of the company and the business world, is it's just simply looking at a team that not only performs really well, but there's also a lot of support, there's also a lot of kindness, and there are several factors that go into that as well. No matter where the team is located or how its people come together. So there are just certain things like the ability to listen to one another, be able to openly talk and share ideas without recourse or embarrassment or retaliation, and just people being open-minded and willing to come together for the work while maintaining their individuality and enhancing the teams that they're in.
I love every point that you mentioned. And what really stood out to me is maintaining one's individuality, right? And we see a lot of toxic environments at the workplace, especially. And there has been a huge push to shift this kind of culture. But as it takes time to shift that toxic workplace into a more psychological safe space for everyone to perform, like you mentioned, where there's no retaliation, kindness is shown. But I want to emphasize on something that you mentioned, maintaining one's individuality and how that is correlated to psychological safety and confidence. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of variables goes into triggering the environment where we can build an environment where we can enable and catalyze where an individual is empowered to have their own individuality and maintain that?
Certainly. This can happen in a number of different ways across different levels of the organization. If you think about the levels of the organization being from like an individual, like your own person, an employee in the company, all the way to like the team level, to the department level, and to the organizational level as a whole, at every level, there is something that can be done to ensure and maintain psychological safety, and to your question, maintain the individuality and allow that to shine through. So it's about knowing and being in an environment that values you, and you also kind of have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, maybe, if you're not that type of person, to kind of be a little vulnerable and really kind of like share a part of yourself to the team and not be too closed off, because it's kind of like a two-way exchange, right? Like, in order for people to work together, there's got to be a little bit of a give and take, which means sometimes you have to kind of put yourself out there a little bit at the individual level. And then as we go up more towards like that bigger and bigger construct, up to like the organizational level, this can look like, you know, an actual policy that's being put in place to help managers and leaders acknowledge and keep in mind that you have individuals on the team, and they may have individual contributions, and allow for that diverse opinions to come through.
I like that you mentioned diversity, you know, to allow that diverse opinions and thought processes to come through. But before we move on to this, I want to acknowledge that we have got viewers. We already have got fans. Alan, you've got fans right now.
Oh, yeah.
I want to acknowledge them really quickly. So we have got Brittany Sherrill from LinkedIn saying, I know this is going to be good. And she also agreed with you that feeling supported is crucial. We also have got Kelly Blackmore saying 100% to what you mentioned. So I appreciate all you viewers. If you've got questions for Alan, please keep it coming, and Alan will be answering it as we go. So I want to get back into what you mentioned about the diverse thoughts, right? And knowing and being in an environment. I want to touch on that really quickly. To capitalize where you can contribute as an individual, and you can have the confidence and have that empowered feeling, right? And you mentioned that knowing and being in an environment. So let's talk about this, because this is very much tied with hiring, interviewing, human capital, a lot of facets of the hiring process and interviewing and going into an organization, right? And especially right now, during the pandemic, people are trying to get back into work or trying to look for work because they are misplaced from the major layoff. Let's talk about knowing and being in an environment where you know that you can contribute and you can shine. From your expertise being in this industry, what kind of tips can you give someone how can they know and that they are in the right environment? Sometimes, you know, being desperate because being displaced calls for desperation, and not in a bad way, because we all need the finances to pay mortgage, rent, and whatnot.
Sure.
So how can we differentiate knowing it's the right environment to ensure our psychological safety, and not knowing and having that desperation just to get into any organization?
Okay. From like the job seeker's perspective as they're going into an organization.
Yeah.
One good way is to ask some questions pertaining to that during the interview. You can kind of like phrase things and ask things in a certain way, and from how the interviewers respond to that, or what they say about that, could be a way to find out. So it's things like, and then it also starts with you personally knowing, like, what are you looking for in a psychologically safe work environment? And that usually depends on like previous experiences that you've had in the past where you were in a pretty toxic team or in a toxic environment. So you know you definitely don't want those. So you can kind of like use that as a basis to start the discussion during the interview, to find out, hey, what is your team currently looking like? So, for example, maybe, being open to communication is important to me, because in the past, like, I haven't had really a lot of chances to to speak up and to connect with my teammates or with my leaders that way. So, if, for example, if I was an interviewee, some of the questions I might ask is like, hey, tell me some of the way that, like, your team kind of communicate with each other. How do they communicate important information, or like things that are need to know from like the higher ups, or just what are the day-to-day communication look like? Do they communicate over email? Is it people casually go into each other's cubes, which may not happen during this COVID environment, but that is just another example. Some teams like to chat over their messaging system, whatever they're using, and then that's their preferred way to directly reach out to somebody, because that's what works best for them. So that's just one example. So, like, asking a lot of questions during the interview would help. Looking up some of these places online, like, through Glassdoor, and maybe some places have their own, like, job boards and website, and people do leave comments about them. Just gives you a pretty good sense of what those past employers or incumbent employees, have been through. Although I would take those with a grain of salt, because they may have, people usually, like, leave a company because they had a terrible experience, and we don't want to lean into that cognitive bias and then just assume that, like, everything we read is an accurate reflection of the organization. But it is an important piece of information to keep in mind as you are exploring the environment. And then from that point on, it really is just about staying the course, knowing what you want to get out of your career, knowing what type of team you want to work in, and how much you're willing to settle for. And again, it's that give and take. We can't all have everything that we want all the time, and sometimes we do have to make compromises, and that's okay. But just make sure that you understand the limit of where, like, that trade-off begins to get a little uncomfortable for you, and it's sacrificing your personal self-worth and what you want to get out of your career.
Beautifully put. I want to expand on one aspect of something that you mentioned, and my mind just kind of like branched out to various things. So you mentioned about speaking up, right? That's also part of ensuring that we know that we're in the right place. And that contributes to us building that psychological safety as well. And speaking up is just not as being in the interview, right? But also speaking up as a team member. Because I know I've been on teams and in different organizations where I have interviewed. I was the, I was the candidate getting interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are these false preconceived notions that as a candidate, you can't challenge too much. If you challenge too much, you will be looked over. But at the same time, that's a basis for us to interview. When you're going into an organization, it's just not the hiring manager or the CEO or team members kind of like interrogating you, but it's also your opportunity to your point. You mentioned about you want to know what kind of people they are. But I want to bring that to the next level. As a team member, the importance of speaking up, and as a peer, as a mentor, and as a manager, the importance of speaking up to build that psychological safe space, right? Speaking, a lot of times people think that you can't speak up, you can't challenge your manager because there's a retaliation, right? But speaking up is also getting your voice heard. It's also about creating, even though there's going to be retaliation against you, but indirectly, you're creating a safe space for others. So let's talk a little bit about speaking up. How can we speak up in different ways? It's not about, no, I disagree with you. but respectfully disagree,
Hmm.
right? Or respectfully speaking up. And what are some different forms that speaking up takes, so that we can build that psychological safe space, not just for us, but for others as leaders?
I think you already kind of touched on one of them already. From like the scientific perspective of the industrial and organizational
Mhm.
psychology, like that perspective of team building and forming, feedback is important, and being able to say something is a valuable factor too. Not just the positive things, but negative things as well. Like studies have shown that it works best when you give both positive and a negative feedback at the same time. And it's kind of like a compliment sandwich in a way, but it's about uh, providing crucial and meaningful information about the work. And perhaps I think that's where we could start off by making sure that, like, the things that we're contributing towards, or the things that we're being critical of, at the end of the day, it's about the work. It's about putting forth the best product or the best services that you and your team want to provide. It would be a completely different story if you're making it personal, and we don't get along with everybody all the time, and that's okay to a level, but at the same time, you can't, I mean, it's not a good way to just go ahead and like start swinging at somebody for being who they are. You may not like that person, but that person may want to hear about this thing that is going to have an impact on the end product, or they would still love to hear about something good that they're doing. And you're absolutely right. Like, being in the room and either being the person saying that and having somebody else observe it, or observing somebody else display those behaviors and characteristics, kind of empowers the team members in a way to adopt that behavior for themselves.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I love that you mentioned about putting forth the best product, right? And we can only put our best product forward when our morals are high. And I want to explore, well, for viewers and listeners out there, let's let's talk a little bit about, in order to put the best product out there, it could be in the form of productivity, right? Because organizations are always looking for, how can we increase our productivity, right? And people are measured on their production, right? If you make X amount of dollars, then you are the best. If you make X number of calls, you're the best. If you finish this project in short number of time, you're the best. But organizations and even the best of the best leaders still do not understand that productivity is related to many variables of the human aspect of it, right? It could be morale, right? And morale is related to engagement. So I want to hear from your perspective.
Great. I feel like we're starting to kind of edge into that realm of human capital, which is an area where I've spent several years in my practice.
Yes.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, so I want to clear up this one misconception about human capital. And I get this a lot whenever I talk about my work to people casually. One of the comments that I usually get is just one of general disgust. Like, I'll tell you a funny story. So a coworker and I were about to meet with some clients, and to facilitate a focus group. We wanted to get some subject matter expertise insight from this group of people. They know their work and they're the best at it. So we were there to just kind of have a conversation with them. And this was our first day, our first time meeting. We all sit down, make our small talk, and right before we're ready to begin, they found out that we were IO psychologists, and we were kind of like doing this human capital work stuff. And somebody at the table just immediately said, I don't like human capital because I don't like being put into a little block and have a label on it. And I thought it was just so interesting. Like, we haven't gotten into anything yet, and this guy is already starting right off the gate with that statement. And to be honest, it's not an inaccurate statement. Like, I also don't want to be put into a block and just have a label slap on it. And I think that's but it's still a pretty common perception. When people think of human capital, it's associated with a certain type of mood or behavior. But what it really is that it's looking at potential behavior, potential productivity, and not just from the perspective of dollars or quotas met, although that's one approach that we can certainly take. But it's also about examining the human being, the humanness of it. Like, what are some of your potentials, and what can you do currently? What are some of your limitations, and how can we help you go beyond that and just keep growing? And that's that's the aspect of human capital that not a lot of people hear about. And really glad to have this platform to share with everybody, because a lot of our work isn't just trying to like put a dollar value on a person. It's about like providing professional development opportunities so that like they can take courses, or we can offer little tidbits and on the job training to help them get better at what they do. It's about respecting work-life balance, because I mean, we have our jobs, we have our careers, but we are not personally defined by that. We also have a life outside of work, and we have families and personal things we have to take care of, and sometimes that gets in the way of working, and that's okay. So yeah.
I love how you put it, right? And it's not only about putting the dollar value, but it's really identifying the potential and the limitations. Let's talk about limitations, because most of the time when you talk about limitations, people kind of freak out and think that, oh, Tim is limited in this, or Susan is limited in this, so we can't promote him or her. We can't invest in them, right? And that's a very, well, to me, it's a backward mindset. It's not a mindset of investing. It's not a mindset of a leader. It's not a mindset of a people success partner, right? And you spoke about better at what you do. Let's invest in something that you are better at, and become better at what you do. And it is also about investing in someone, or taking a risk on someone, right? Where 20 people can say, no, she's not that great. It's a waste of time investing in this person. But at the same time, it's like planting a seed in the wrong pH soil, so the seed does not grow. I had to give that analogy.
No, that was spot on. That was great.
So, from a human capital perspective, what are some strategy or adoption that we as leaders can take to identify someone who is struggling in their space, but we have to step back and look at, maybe they are not good in this space. How about we pluck them and put somewhere else? So what are some tips that you can give leaders out there?
Sure, great question. I mean, one thing they can absolutely do is to look at the person as a whole, and not just by what their limitation is. Because you're right, like, limitations does have a certain negative connotation to it, and it usually almost always lead to a negative outcome or consequence when we focus on that. So one way to get around this is just not to put such a heavy emphasis on it. It's important to realize about this individual, and like a direct report or one of your team members, but there was this thing in psychology called halo bias, where we assume that like if you're bad at one thing or good at one thing, you tend to be good, bad or good across everything else, and that's simply not true. Like just because you're bad at Excel doesn't mean you can't potentially make a great leader one day. And so it's important to look at the whole person and realize, like going back to what I mentioned earlier, the positives and the negatives, just to get a more complete picture of who do you have on your team there. And you could look at past performances, you can sit down and have a chat with them about like, hey, what have you done in the past, what are you looking to do, what are you hoping for to do. I always appreciate my managers and supervisors who come to me having these conversations. It shows that they care about me and they care about my growth, and it's a part of maintaining and fostering a psychologically safe workplace. So yeah.
I love how you tie everything together. It's beautiful. And as you were discussing about, really identifying the strengths of someone, it reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen this cartoon, it's from a newspaper where an elephant, a fish, a snake, different animals, right, are kind of like lined up in a queue, and and the person in front of them, a human, says, okay, I would like all of you to do one thing. So a fish, like, I think the task was to climb a tree. So the fish obviously can't climb a tree because fish, they swim. And the elephant can't really climb a tree. So it reminded me of, every animal, they have got different strengths. A fish can swim, hold its breath underneath the water. I can't even hold my breath for 2 seconds underneath the water. So that's the analogy that I want to bring to put forth, that we are all different. Even standardized examination does not test someone's capability, someone's strength. Intelligence is absolutely different from skills and strengths. And sometimes, again, the misconception to your point, if you're bad at Excel, I've heard this narratives at the workplace a lot. You're stupid. You can't do anything right, or you will not be good at something, right? I'm not good at running. I can't run for more than 5 seconds. When I go jogging, I brisk walk. That's my jogging. So, but does not mean that I can't brisk walk. Does not mean that I can't do anything else right. So I love the point that you made. Just because someone is not good at Excel does not mean that they will not be a great leader. But I love that you tied everything together, right? When we invest in our people, when we find that potential, when we invest in people's professional development, it creates that safe environment and psychological safety. And to bring it all together, Alen, what 3 tips do you have for our viewers and listeners out there, where as a leader and as an individual contributor, as a peer, even as an entry-level candidate, what 3 things can they do to create a psychological safe space for themselves and for their team?
Great question. Actually, before I jump into that, you just made me think of another thing. And sometimes like leaders can provide certain accommodations and support to just patch up the gaps, whether sometimes the gaps can be very huge or very little, but this is where accommodation and equity and organizational justice comes in, because sometimes people just need to have a little bit of support just to like optimize their behavior. It doesn't always need to be like, oh, put them in this class or invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into this, but it's just another small way to foster that kind of environment. But going back to your questions, the 3 things that people could do. First of all, communication is key. Be open to communicate. I mean, within reason, of course. You don't have to share everything on your mind unfiltered, but there is something to be said about having the difficult conversation necessary. to get at the root of the problem and really tackle the issue in a way that's like collaborative, and again focusing on like the objective of the collaboration. So that's one, just being willing to talk and listen to within the team environment. Also be open-minded and considerate, just kind of like, avoiding that halo bias. Just consider that like the person that you're seeing across from you may have more going on than what can be observed from the surface. And whether, it may be none of your business, you don't have to know every little thing about it, but just know that like there's more than meets the eye, and sometimes that does contribute to what you're seeing and what you're hearing from them. And so another thing is, be proactive about wanting to contribute to a psychologically safe environment and workspace. Whether you are a fellow team member and you're like I mentioned earlier, watching somebody do this, or like you demonstrating the behavior yourself, or if you're a leader and you have the power to leverage a particular policy or encourage your fellow managers to support their team members. But it takes a proactive approach, and we all have to put in that hard work. It just doesn't happen magically.
No, I agree with you. It's not like you become a fantastic leader overnight or by going to a course, right? To your point, we become better by practicing it every day. It's like eating right. It's like dieting, not dieting, I mean exercising, right? To reach the ideal weight or ideal body that you want to gain, it is about consistency. So I love that you mentioned that it is consistency. And before we go, we have a question from one of our viewers,
Great.
Kelly Blackmore. And he asks, what can management do to ensure they have an open mind about employees?
That's a great question, Kelly. And some of the things that, I'm kind of thinking of off the top of my head, and, based on what I've seen out in the field, once again, it's that proactive, like they really have to want it. So quick joke, some of you may have heard about this before. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
One, but the light bulb has to want to change.
Oh.
So it's a little corny, but there you go. So if they want, if they are receptive to it, certainly, but also, I mean, it takes some encouragement. And I've seen certain environments where it was like just a strict order, like leadership wants you to do this and hear out your direct reports more. And sometimes that'll help. It's not the best way to go about it, but it's certainly another strategy. Also providing them like the resources and support too to the managers. I mean, it's not just for like the employees at the frontline level. I mean, like mid-level managers and sometimes executive leaders also need a little bit of guidance themselves. So having that support available, knowing that other people want them to do it, and giving them a chance to also contribute and think of ways that they could address this problem in their own style and manner also help. Those are all like a battery of little things that together can encourage change.
I love that you mentioned that. And of course, change does not occur overnight. And I agree with you. A lot of the times in organizations, people have change management departments, and they have this strategy without understanding people, right? Because change takes time. I'm going to go back to your the analogy of losing weight again. It takes 3 months for your body to realize, oh yeah, I am in the mode of losing weight. I need your lipid cells gets triggered after 12 weeks. then you will see slight changes that, oh yeah, this is happening right now. 3 months. Within 3 to 6 months, then you get adopted to that behavior of, okay, my stomach is adopting to this kind of food. My my various parts of my body is adopting to the exercises. So if humanly speaking, right, scientifically speaking, from a biological stance, if your body takes 3 months to realize, yes, this is the start point, then 3 to 6 months, then you're adopting that behavior, then change management in an organization takes time. I see a lot of the time where new management comes in, and even like but what do you say? Oh my God, I'm forgetting that term. When two organizations combine together, what's that term?
A merger?
Yes, a merger. It was right there, and I couldn't think about it. A merger. When mergers occur, a lot of change happens, right? Management kind of merge together, people get let go, new management comes in, there's a new style coming in, and people are expected to adopt quickly, and they have this change management plan saying, okay, you're going to be trained, this is what we will do, and you're going to be trained to use these tools, just deal with it. If you don't like it, you can leave it. And that impacts someone's psychological safety as well.
Absolutely. And it does not happen that way from like the science of work, from an IO psych standpoint, from a human capital standpoint. Things just, it just doesn't happen like that. And they can also do more damage in the process. And I also see like a lot of leaders who are really so gung-ho about their particular brand of change and their strategy that they almost kind of get like a tunnel vision. And it's kind of like, they were coming from it from a good place. They want to improve the organization, but sometimes things just don't work at this particular workplace or this new environment that the merger has created. And some people take that as a failure and they've done something wrong, and it's just not a good thing. But I mean, sometimes we need to find out what doesn't work in order to help us get to what we do know will work. And so failure isn't just like this bad, horrendous thing that you should feel shame and guilty about. It's a signal to tell you to maybe try another route or explore more options.
I love that mindset. Failure is actually an opportunity. It's like a door, like a magical door saying, hey, here's another chance. Let's redo this. So I love that you brought that up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Alen, I know that we're running out of time, and it's been such a pleasure having you exploring the signs of psychological and the importance of having a psychological safe workplace or environment. I know a lot of organizations are committed to adopting a diverse, more efficient, more impactful environment, and they're committed to bringing the heart into the spaces. Where can listeners and viewers find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Alen Chao. And I think that's really the only place. I don't have a lot of social media that I float around with. But.
No TikTok.
Not
like
ones I'm willing to share,
TikTok.
anyways. No, I'm kidding. No, I do not have a TikTok. But looking forward to making new friends.
Yeah. Thank you again for bringing your wisdom, bringing your expertise on heartship, the now workplace, diversity, leadership, and as viewers, listeners out there, thank you for supporting. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up on iTunes, on Spotify, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and of course follow Alen Chao. He is a brilliant expert in psychological safety and organizational development. He is an advocate of wellness, mental wellness as well. And I've seen his work. He's just doing brilliant work in his community as well. So, Alan, thank you once again for being here. Truly appreciate you.
Thank you for the kind words, and thanks for having me. This was really fun.
You're welcome. All right, folks, that's all that we have for this week. I'll catch you again next week. Toodles.